Welcome. We're going to talk about arrays. Most of us have used arrays without thinking about them much. Let's give the example of a spreadsheet. If you look at this spreadsheet, you notice that you have columns. Column A, for example, contains 6 integers. Column C contains 6 strings. E contains 6 floats. And D contains 6 characters. And there's lots of ways of looking at these columns. What you might say is column A consists of data, a collection of 6 pieces of data. The same for C, D, C, E, and G. We also notice that when we want to talk about all of the whole numbers, we will say look into column A. Notice that if we treat column A as all of the numbers, then we really have a way of telling one number from another, and that is over here we see a row. So the value 2 is actually in column A. It's in the collection of values in column A, but it's in row number 3. Likewise, the value 5 is in row 6. So that what we have represented here is one column, many values. So the concept behind an array is simply this: one variable that can hold many values. Now I want to give you a quick preview at how you would go about establishing something like these columns in C++. Last thing to note, column A contains only integers. Column G contains only characters. So let's take a look at what it would be like to create the values that we see in the spreadsheet using C++. And the first thing we notice is that we're declaring the data type, followed by the variable name, followed by an indication of how many values we want. And then finally, we initialize this to the set of values in order: 4, 3, 2, 8, 7, 5. Notice that when we initialize and we must have many values, we must surround the values in set braces. Now you might say, how do I do the second column? And you should say it should look like what? String is the data type. The variable name we're going to use is C. And how many are there? There are 6. And what are the values? We will initialize them. Well, don't be surprised. When we initialize them, we must list values that represent the data type. The data type is string, so all the string values must be surrounded by double quotes. Notice that the values in the list are separated by a comma. First value, comma, second value, comma, third value, comma. Okay? And then you get the hang of this. So let's do one more. And what do you think is going to be for G? Well, for G, you're going to say the value, the data type is char. The name of my collection is G. There are 6 in the collection. I will initialize them with values. So over here we see the letter C, but the data type is character, so we must, when we list a value, we must surround each value with a single quote. Okay? Now let's talk about what we're looking at. In C++, we call all of these arrays. We know that we have an array because the variable name is followed by a left square brace. That means this is an array. What I'm declaring is a variable that can hold multiple values. Recall, if this had begun int a left paren, you would say, aha, this is not a variable, this is a function because of the left paren. Similarly, when I see the left square bracket, it really means that what I'm declaring is an array. Okay? Now suppose we had 10 columns, 10 rows rather. How would you change this declaration here? Yes, you would of course say I need 10, not 6. And I would complete the initialization list. Let's take a look at some of the code behind this. Okay? Okay, a couple things. Yeah, let's take a look at the code. Some code. Oops. All right. All right, in this code, we're focusing on the array A. I don't know why I've twisted these, but the lowercase a represents what we saw in the spreadsheet, and this is an array that we have initialized. We initialize with the initialization list, which looks like a set of values. We also have another array, capital A, which is uninitialized, but it has the capacity of storing up to 6 values. Notice that lowercase a already contains 6 values. Array capital A currently really has no values in it. It has the capacity, but there are no values stored in it. So we typically keep track of how many values are currently being used in an array. I tend to call this the size of the array. The capacity of the array, which you set when you create it, is a different number. And at any given time, the array may be filled to capacity or it may not be. So let's look at the process of reading values into the array. Well, how do I read the values into the array? One by one. So I read the first value, place it in the first position. Now, there is a major point of view difference that you have to get used to. In the example of the spreadsheet, we have the first value is in row 1, row 2, and then the last row is row 6. As in math, we normally start subscripts at 0 instead of 1. So in C++, subscripts start at 0 instead of 1. So if that's the case, what does it mean? It means the first subscript in C++ is a 0, and the last one is not 6, but it's 5. So when I want to read a certain number of values into the array, notice that I have to have a loop. It's very critical to understand that this loop has one job. This for header has one job, and that job is to generate the subscripts that you need to use. We said for this array, capital A, the subscripts ought to be 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So this loop will generate subscripts K, that's 1, 2, 3, 4. It stops less than the number of vowels, which is 6. Okay, so that's the one thing. A couple more things. As we're going to see later on, the moment you mention arrays, you always have for loops. And the for loops do what? They generate, the for header generates the subscripts that we want to use. So why don't we compile this and run this quickly? Alright, so we've already compiled it. We're just going to run it. And here we're being asked, enter number of values. I'm going to put 4 values in. First value is going to be 17, 12, 9, and 2. Right. And then we want to display the first and last values in the array. All right, so let's go and look at the code. Where's the first value? The first value is identified by a subscript. Where do the subscripts begin? 0. So the first value is indicated A sub 0. The name of the array is A. The subscript for the first element is 0. And the number of values, if I have 4 values, what are the subscripts? 0, 1, 2, and 3. So the last value, the subscript, is the number of values minus 1. That's the subscript of the last value. Right. And finally, in lowercase a, which we initialize, what's the third value? The third value is a 2. And what's the first value? Is a 4. Again, we got to remember our numbering system. The first value has a subscript of 0. The third value has a subscript not 3, but 3 minus 1, which is 2. So if we look at our output, we see the first and third values are 4 and 2. Let me clean that. I think with that we're going to end the first notion. Let me summarize. In C++, we can create a variable that has the ability to hold many values. Such a variable is called an array. An array, since it has multiple values, can be initialized by providing a list of values, one value for each element in the array. We've also seen that if you must walk through the whole array, a for loop is required, and generally the for loop generates the subscripts that you need to access the elements of the array. So with that, we will stop.